Hit it, Shaquille. Hit it.
Go for it, buddy.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, great, excellent.
Yeah.
So let's all just let's give him a moment. Yep, first person of that skin color, that nationality. Yep, excellent, cool. Now moving along to policies.
Yeah, but what do you think? What do you think about him as a prime minister? What do you
I think he's going to do a terrible job, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. It's got nothing to do.
Just cut right to it.
Skin color or anything like that.
Why do you
I'll
say
tell you
that?
the reason why. He, in US dollar terms, is a billionaire. He is the kind of conservative that the conservative parties of the world and center-right parties are trying to get away from. People don't want people supposedly representing them that look like bankers and look like, really smooth private school kid, not working class kind of people, not from a working class background. He's got an incredibly big heated pool when people in the UK are struggling to pay their power bills. I don't think that that's going to resonate with people. Within the Tories, you've seen all this dysfunction. Tory members in their droves are leaving the party and saying that they're going to join Nigel Farage's party because they're not happy about things. I think you slipped up when you said his taxes. He was opposed to Theresa May's tax cuts. But look, he didn't support Brexit, which again, that's something that that's not really what the UK people are looking for. I really think that this is going to be very difficult for him to maintain the support of the Tories. I don't think he's got enough personality and enough sense of humour and enough sort of charisma to take the country through what will be a difficult time. So I think the Tories need to rethink. I think the gamemanship that's gone on in the Tories has been terrible for the party. And frankly, although I think the Tories would lose and they're the party that I support, I actually think the right thing to do would be to head towards a general election in the United Kingdom. So I don't want to take anything away from him for the fact that he is the first person of Indian descent to reach high office in the UK. But that's not relevant to.
Well, he has a very short runway. We're going to get to. Let's go to Dan Worthington. I want everyone in the panel to talk about this. We're not going to spend the whole show on it because we're getting the debates. But I guess I'll push it to Nick, and then we'll just go down the road to Chris and everybody. He doesn't have a very. I mean, Shaquille Latimer brings up a good point. The honeymoon is going to be very short in this, and he really doesn't have a lot of runway to turn this thing around. So for all you know, if he's not able to succeed, this thing could be heading towards general election, and maybe he'll be there for 3 weeks. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the thing is, what's his mandate? What is he going? What is the mandate that he has, either from the Tories or from the British people? He's just kind of gotten in there. This is not what should be happening.
Nick, what are your thoughts following this?
Sorry, we skipped over Dan. Dan?
Oh, Dan Worthington, sorry.
I think Boris had the right idea is to avoid this like the plague. He's sort of in an impossible position. He should last longer than 44 days, but probably not much longer because he's in a no-win situation, right? Yeah. He's just sort of a figurehead for now until they can figure out what to do next, because it's a total screw up right now, right? They got themselves backed into a corner, and I agree with Shaquille. Guy has to have the charisma and leadership skills to be able to maneuver that because people are suffering. And unless he has that and the support of the people, it isn't going to happen. I think, he's the finance guy even when the previous prime minister was there, right? So
yes, he was. And there was some, I didn't talk about my monologue, there was some disagreements that him and Boris Johnson had. I think he did serve as the finance minister, but I can't remember what there was. There were some differences. I think Boris Johnson didn't like some things that he said or did, and then Boris Johnson resigned and he threw himself back in. So this could be a short-term gap stay. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, it is interesting to note that, and looking at the news, that Mr. Sunak has said that they are not going to hold general elections for the next 2 years. So I don't know how he can do that, unilaterally like that. In other words,
the Parliament could just call it. They could call it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's exactly. Well, it all depends if Sunak's party is going to back him up or not. But bottom line is this: is that Why 2 years, Rishi? Are the other person had 44 days to prove the medal or get out. You're going to have 2 years? That seems kind of unfair to me. All of a sudden, it's kind of like, hey, now I got 2 years with which to mess with things, British people and the rest of them, to make sure that, I get it right, and Shaquille's right. I mean, the guy's a billionaire. I mean, when you talk about things that people do not understand, how can they possibly understand it? Although I have to admit that during the debate with Truss, he predicted pretty much what was going to happen. Now, there's two ways of predicting this, Steve. Either the guy is really brilliant and he predicted all this, or he helped cause it. So, I sit back and I look. I'm very conspiratorial by nature. So I sit back and I go, this guy, did he help cause the issues that ended up bringing down Truss? Or did he actually say this is going to happen and then just sat back and said, yep, it happened now. I'll take charge and I'll go ahead and do what I need to do. So, I have some mixed aspects about this, but I'm not a UK citizen. So, the only time I've ever been in the UK was when I was in the Air Force, to take a look at some Air Force bases and intelligence in that area and to do some intelligence.
Well, don't let it hold you back,
that's
Chris. I'm not a US citizen. It doesn't stop me from making unwanted comments.
Yeah.
Then and we'll go to the Senate debates. But any final thoughts on Rishi Sunak? We are going to be following this situation closely. It'd be interesting to see what I think President Biden had announced at the Diwali event that he was about to call the prime minister or was going to be on the phone with him. But going to be interesting to see what they talk about in terms of Ukraine. U.S. and Britain have been allies for many years. But any final thoughts about Prime Minister Sunak?
I do have some thoughts.
Nick, go first.
Even though I'm not a British citizen, I did go to school at Oxford. It's one of the advantages of being a trust baby. So just eat it, Shaquille. Okay.
And you are exactly the kind of conservative now that you try to.
There we go. But the thing is, in reality, the jury's still out, Steve. I mean, the thing is, this reminds me a lot of when Obama came into office, whether Dan likes Obama or not, because there are people who hate Obama. It won't make any difference what I say. But here's the reality. George W. Bush and the Republicans destroyed the economy in 2008. Completely obliterated. Anybody who was in business like I was in 2008, we saw our incomes be destroyed by the Republicans and by George Bush. It was actually turmoil in 2008. And then we elected this guy, Obama. And I was going, I don't think he could turn the ship around. And whether you like it or not, all the metrics, he did. Okay. And so the final verdict was this makes Republicans go crazy, but they were the worst economic leaders in the world in 2008. And the Democrats saved the day.
No,
let's go to what's happening right now with Sunak. The jury's out. We don't know what he's going to do. He could be like Biden, who just spends money like crazy and doesn't know what he's doing. Because I can't say the same thing I like a Biden like I did with Obama, because the metrics are bad for Biden. But the jury's out, Steve. And in terms of Chris wanting to give him 2 months, Chris, out of your mind? You can't turn a ship around in 2 months. Of course he gets 2 years. Go become a football coach and say, turn the team around in 2 months. Nobody's going to be able to do it. So 2 years is very rational. Hopefully he's a good, strong leader, and he pushes aside all the crazies that are out there, including the ones on our media show, and does a good job. So we'll just have to wait.
Lee Rose, any final thoughts before we get into the Senate debates?
It is a question for, I guess, for Shaquille and for Chris. They both brought up in terms of his mass wealth. How is that relevant? Are we saying that someone who's wealthy has no idea what the average man is going through in terms of the economy, jobs?
Lee, come on, man. That was a rhetorical question. That was rhetorical. I know it. You're being rhetorical. I get it. I mean, people like Pelosi People like Shaquille. Shaquille will never understand exactly what us peons have to go through. I mean, he makes what, $160,000 a day. I mean, the guy goes around in a private jet. He gets free hair plugs. I mean, a guy just does.
I'm not quite at those levels.
He
just does whatever he
wants. Let me explain. Let me just explain a couple of things.
Defend myself.
I didn't say that he couldn't understand the plight of the everyday person, that sort of thing. What I said was that.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Okay, but but what I'm saying is I don't think that he's going to be very appealing to people outside of the conservative Tory base. Now, even amongst them, a lot of them are unhappy because they felt like they didn't get a proper vote in the party room. So what's happened is that Tories have now left the party. People that have been Tories their entire lives have actually resigned their membership to the Tories in order to favour groups like Nigel Farage's UK Independence Party. So this is a problem, and I think that it's going to be difficult for him. As for him having 2 years or not having 2 years, Nick, I believe that when there is this level of political instability, when you've just rushed through all these different prime ministers on the Conservative side, you don't have Jeremy Corbyn there. I don't think that there is a credible excuse, if you have any respect for democracy, to continue to allow the party room people to make decisions over who's going to lead the country and not give that decision back to the people. I think it's wrong. And you may see, look, it hasn't been proposed yet, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a motion for a loss of confidence in the government at some point. Okay, I just think that what's happening in the UK at the moment is a complete shambles, and changing the Prime Minister so that you can get one that favours your policies versus another is not right. And let's remember the bond market reacted badly to Liz Truss's proposed tax cuts. He comes in backed by big banks, obviously somebody who's in finance. I mean, come on, it's not hard to see. If the situation was if I was in charge of the US Treasury and all of a sudden I made some move, not that I could because I'm not American born or a citizen, but just hypothetically, and I made that kind of move and I was a billionaire, do you think the everyday American person would go, something's a bit fishy here, Shaquille knows a lot of banks, what's going on? And that's exactly what the people in England, for example, are going to say. Those northern parts of England that voted to leave the EU. I mean, it's just not going to work like this.
Well, anyway, from Churchill to Sunak, quite a journey. We'll see. We hope that he gets to a good start. We'll be monitoring the situation, any updates. Let's get into the debates. I've been so busy traveling that Shaquille, you've been watching them and maybe some others, but why don't we start with last night, Oz and Fetterman. Any insight there of what those debates were entailed?
You'll pick the one that I haven't watched all off yet. I did watch the highlights. I did watch the highlights though, and I mean Fetterman's performance was about as expected. I'm surprised actually that he even went up there. I thought his wife would have jumped out and done it for him, given that Biden said that she'd make a good addition to the Senate.
So I have an actual familial link with Fetterman. Of all things, not that I'm not for this guy at all, but basically it's this. Fetterman was the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania. My mother was born in Braddock, Pennsylvania. So basically, specifically North Braddock. And this guy has stated, I brought crime down. I did this. I did that. I did this. They went out to Braddock and they interviewed people of Braddock. And it's funny because a segment of Braddock says, oh, he did great. Yes, he did fantastic. Oh, it was really super. We're really sorry to see him go. The other segment, and I won't go into segments, but the other segment of Braddock says, look down Main Street. You got your camera. Look down Main Street. What do you see? What do you see? Any shops whatsoever that are active? Do you see, what do you see in the way of progress? What did Fetterman leave us? What did he do to it? What did he do to this city, to this small community? It's near Kennywood Park of all things. It's near one of the major amusement parks in the nation. And Braddock has been historically very, very bad from the standpoint of homelessness and homes in general, different aspects. Not like when my mother was a kid. It was of course totally and completely different. So Fetterman gets up last night and he starts talking about different aspects, and he's allowed to have. Now this is interesting, and I get it. I'm an ADA proponent. I get this stuff, but he was allowed to have a a teleprompter that would go by to make sure that he could get, because he's recovering from a stroke, so they allowed him to have a teleprompter. Now, I thought, you're allowing him to have a teleprompter. You're allowing him, the time to be able to get his answers together, a teleprompter to be able to get, his different outline points in there and everything else. And there's Mehmet Oz. Now, granted, the guy's he's got an MD, he's a cardiologist, he's got all kind of different aspects of going for him. But why is it that we're allowing, a candidate who is going to be a senator, a United States senator? Are we going to have teleprompters on the Senate floor? Are we going to have? Are we going to allow? Are we going to? Because we should have that. But if we're going to do that, let's do that now before he gets into office, and allow all those other people that maybe can't hear real well or can't do anything, can't read as fast as another person, that they can have a teleprompter or something else to be able to do that. So
we have sign language.
Yes. In fact, I think they do have sign language interpreters, but the closed captioning, actually, they have closed captioning, which is, I'm not saying it's much better, but it is somewhat better, because American Sign Language is based, of all things, the American Sign Language is based on the French language, which, it pisses me off at times they call it the American Sign Language, which it's based on freaking French. But basically, anyways, I took some sign language. So bottom line is this, is that, I know we get back to the French as jerks.
Are you glad that Louisiana was bought off the French, are you?
So basically, what happens is, Steve, is that I feel that actually it was a pretty good debate. I watched some of it. It was actually very civilized. It was good from the standpoint. The only thing I liked about Fetterman was the fact that when he said, "What football team would you vote for?" he said Pittsburgh Steelers, and Mehmet Oz says Philadelphia Eagles. And at that point, I said, I'm sorry, but Fetterman, you got a point on that one, because that's, I'm a Steelers fan from when I was a little boy. Absolutely. So hey,
what are some policy differences though? Then I want to get to Rubio and Demings, which is going to be an interesting.
Can I say, watching all the debates, I have to say, I think they've all been conducted pretty well. I mean, we haven't seen, anything like what happened with Trump and Biden. I mean, that was just a disgrace from both sides. But these debates have been pretty good. But one of the resounding themes that I keep hearing being brought up by various gubernatorial candidates or Senate candidates is things like, well, you're an election denier. And then, from the Democrats to the Republicans sort of invariably respond with, well, what about Hillary Clinton and she said it and all that sort of stuff. The thing is, I really don't think that that's a talking point that's going to be winning anybody over. And I think that's a real problem for Democrats coming into this, is that they're going to have to look at things that aren't just appealing to the people that are already going to vote for the Democrats. The Republicans, I think, are probably doing a better job there. They're really hammering home things like crime and things going on in schools. Democrats tend to be quite wishy-washy on their responses to that. But also, when people who I think held themselves pretty well, like Hochul did in New York, the problem with it is that if you listen to her, or even with Whitmer, if you listen to them, they come across very well. They come across very credible. If this is the first you'd ever heard them, you'd never know anything else about them, you'd think, that sounds like a good candidate. But people that live in those states, and I've spoken to a lot of my friends in those states, they go, we've watched the debates. What are they talking about? They're talking about how they were supporting the police the whole time, and they're supporting this and that. And another thing that I found was interesting that was brought up in a couple of debates was the question of whether or not vaccines would be mandatory for school children. That's something that has been brought up by Republicans, and I think the Democrats have had to sort of come off that quite heavily from the positions that they previously had. I think it sounds a little bit insincere, to be honest.
Yeah.
Insincere, or are they backtracking on what they originally said, ignoring the fact that we have a thing called video cameras and the internet?
Well, as I'm not American, you get an election cycle, I'm going to try and be diplomatic and just go with insincere.
Okay.
Well, it's
that is true.
So let's get to, I want to talk about Rubio and Demings. I haven't really been following Marco Rubio recently. I mean, the last few years, I haven't really seen him front and center. He ran for president, didn't make it. Cuban American the son of immigrants. But what is he in trouble? And what's the main thing there between Demings and Rubio? Any thoughts there?
I've got a couple of thoughts, and I'm sorry that I was having internet problems and everything. I actually watched that debate, and I watched the majority of the debate and all of that. And to come back to something that Shaquille said earlier, I unfortunately have not watched the other two debates. I'll go back, and I did hear that certain people owned other folks and all in that space, and I'll make a judgment on that later on. But in that debate, I actually think that it was not a good debate and all in that space. It was actually one of those debates where the moderators lost control. And I think even some of the co-moderators admitted that they felt that they had lost control because there was a lot of give and take back and forth between Rubio and Demings. And there were a couple of times that they were not following the Robert's Rules of Order. And there was definitely some frustration going on there, I think, both from the audience as well as from both other candidates from what I was seeing. So it was one of those cases where, as I was watching it, it did look like a moving train wreck. And all along those lines, it definitely did not look like a well-run debate and all in that space. I do think that in this particular case, there is some cases where Rubio may be running into some problems and everything because there were some issues that were brought up that within the party are tried to paint one way, but it's kind of hard to paint that way when the person comes from a law and order background and everything. Because definitely, I think that Rubio did try to go after Demings about some of her policies, but some of them did seem to me somewhat disingenuous because, like I said, he was attacking her on her law and order record there in Orlando because she was the police chief down there for a number of years. And it was almost like he was trying to paint her into that Democratic area of not supporting law and order. But this was a former Orlando police chief, so I don't know that you can really paint her in that way and everything.
This is a former police chief. Let me make sure we're on the same page. This is the former police chief who comes from a family of police officers who has then basically sold out the police department and talked about taking away their funding, talking about...
She's a United States Congresswoman. Is she a United States Congresswoman, right?
She is a United States Congresswoman. She has talked about getting... kind of this that whole semantics about defunding the police. She has talked about scaling down on some police funding. She has talked about also supporting the police in a lot of ways, and she does have the endorsement of some police organizations, including some police unions. So I do think that Rubio is in trouble.
People's memories don't last just until the next election cycle. Okay, the fact of the matter is that most police unions in the United States have either gone to Republicans or switched their allegiance from Democrats to Republicans. They're not going to switch back now because 2 weeks before the midterm elections, she says, well, I said I was going to defund you and you're all racist, horrible people that target people of color. But actually, I'm here to support you. People aren't going to buy that. And that's the thing. Like, yes, that debate was more heated than the others were. But obviously, there's no love lost between.
I think Mark.
For the most part, this isn't going to work, Mark.
I think Marco Rubio. I had more hope for Marco Rubio, even as a moderate Democrat, when he first was elected. I thought, this is a young son of Cuban immigrants, hardworking. He's been to me a disappointment. He's not leading on anything. He's never had a job. I actually found out that somebody emailed me that he's late on every credit card. He's overdraws his checking accounts. I mean, this guy, he needs to just go. He's dreaming if he's staying in the Senate. He's never going to have a chance to be president. I don't think anyone's going to put him on a presidential ticket. I mean, honestly, I think it's best for Marco Rubio if he loses this thing, send him back home, let him get a job, let him know how to balance a checkbook, and pay his credit card.
Now, Steve, in the interest of not being a partisan, can you name a single Democrat that you would say the same thing about, right? Haven't had a job, late paying their bills, just a financial screw up, had never done anything positive. Can you name any?
I didn't say anything about him being a Republican. I just said Marco Rubio needs to get his act together.
Rubio he went to the University of Miami Law School, just like I did. He wins because he went to the U, baby.
What's he done? He hasn't led on anything in the Senate in the last few years. I haven't heard a damn thing. Pardon my French.
Yeah, in terms of not.
Do we see the debates make a difference, anyways?
That's it.
So I guess
has anyone changed their mind based on a debate?
Yeah, so
Now let's get to Herschel Walker and Stacey Abrams. Oh, it's Kimberly Calhoun, a woman in the House and the founder of our network. Let's get, well, we're going to come back to Rubio. Let's get to the heat of the matter. Herschel Walker, 3rd and long. I'm going in for the touchdown, baby. I watched him when he was at UGA against Stacey Abrams. And hell, she hasn't even won a Senate race, and they're already talking about her running for president. What's going on in Georgia,
Well,
folks?
hold on a second.
Wasn't she governor just recently?
No, there's a different race.
That election was stolen, and you can say that.
Right, and it's two different races because Herschel Walker is actually running against Reverend
Walker's
Warnock.
running against Warnock. Sorry. Right. So let's talk about that first. And Abrams is running for governor. Let's talk about Warnock and Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker, the big controversy is he paid for his wife's abortion, but then he's pro-life, just like Mark Robinson, our lieutenant governor, who said, he's all against, he's pro-life, but he pays for his wife's abortion. And what our lieutenant governor said is, I saw the light and God told me I did the wrong thing. Oh yeah, Lieutenant Governor. We'll be bringing that up when you debate Josh Stein to be the 77th governor of North Carolina. And I think Josh Stein's going to take him to the cleaners, but that's just my political opinion. Of course, Josh is my friend. But
that's because that's your political opinion.
But when people like Biden make comments a few years ago that you can't go to a 7-Eleven without a slight Indian accent, we'll let that slide, right? When Democrats say stuff 30, 40 years ago, we let that slide. But if it's a Republican, we're going to hammer it with it.
Well, the latest argument that I've been hearing, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with it, is that there have been some parallels between Herschel Walker and Colin Kaepernick, because people have been saying that, that it's wrong for Colin to say things because he was saying it while he was an athlete, and he still is saying things even though he doesn't have a contract and everything. But it's all right for Herschel to say the different things that he says because he's off that sports stage and everything. I personally don't have anything wrong, and I've told y'all this before, with art activists and or athlete activists. If you want to be an activist while you are also an artist and or an entertainer or an athlete, I have no problem with that. Steve,
well, Walker actually has
here's the problem.
You can compare the two.
Okay. If Herschel Walker gets elected and Mehmet Oz gets elected and Trump comes back and becomes president, we're going to have the version of Celebrity Apprentice going on in the White House.
There you go.
So Mark, it's interesting that you say that you've got no problems with athlete activists, because we had a conversation last year about rugby players in Australia who opposed wearing gay pride colours on their jerseys and were banned. That they were told that they can't wear it anymore, and they had to challenge it in the High Court. And you thought that was perfectly reasonable. In fact, what you said at the time was, well, they've got to abide by the rules of the sport. And if they're not prepared to do that, then, so be it. You didn't stand up for them and say, oh, absolutely, they should be able to be an activist. So when you say you support athlete activists...
Shaquille, we're going to go back to the videotape, because that doesn't even sound like anything that I said. But I'll go back to the videotape and I'll find out if I actually made that statement, because I do not remember saying anything like that, because I've always been a supporter of athlete activists and artist activists, and they have been in my family for a number of years and everything. So
name for me a conservative Republican athlete activist that you've been a vocal supporter
of. Jack Kemp.
Wow.
He was a football and an activist, and I actually am a fan of
Mark. That's good, Mark. That's good. That's good.
Was that back when you were getting horses and carts to school? I mean,
was Jack Kemp a U.S. senator? I forget.
Who knows? Yes. It was the turn of the other century.
Is he still alive, Jack Kemp?
No, he died. I think he threw the last pass.
Mark, you're forgetting to mention one small detail. When you compare the two, and one's on the field and one's off the field. So a lot of us, that's a very big difference.
I said that's the argument. That's the argument, that one is on and one is off.
Kimberly, what are your thoughts of all of this? Kimberly, what are your thoughts?
I think it has stirred a beehive based on the conversations I've heard here today. I think we just need to sit back and kind of let things unfold a little bit. I'm still curious about the prime minister conversation that you gentlemen had. I think, again, we don't ever give a person a real opportunity to do what they need to do or want to do without being bashed nowadays. And it would be nice. I don't think 2 years is enough time to fix the problems he has, because he's going to be swimming upstream against naysayers and the media going this way and that way. So I think that it would be nice to get politicians or government officials that were not party affiliated anymore in our country, going back to our country, and in a means of which we can just have real conversations that are not one side or the other, but just about our human issues that we need to take care of. That's my point of view. Again, it doesn't draw media attention. All of the contention is what draws the media attention. But I think it would be interesting to see what would happen if we just had humans in office, not parties that have party favors. And that's what I have preached for years. I'm looking at everyone who's alternative to the two parties throwing mud at each other because I'm really sick and tired of it. I have no idea what most of the people are even doing for us or what they're going to do for us. But the Green Party seems to have some really good agendas, and they've been speaking out loud about what their agendas are.
But they don't have a chance, Kimberly. That's the problem. They don't have a chance. I mean,
no, they don't, because we have a bunch of people in our country who don't know how to think aside from a party. And that's sad. You're either this side or this side. That's very sad. But you know what? That's I guess what makes America
great. The game is played.
I have to respond to a couple of things here. So firstly, I don't think it would be really nice to give him a couple of years. Why is that really nice? Nice to whom exactly? Liz Truss didn't get a couple of years. So she only gets 44 days. He gets 2 years. Like, where's the fairness in that? Why shouldn't this be that whoever is going to get 2 years or 4 years for a whole prime ministerial term, why shouldn't that be something that's decided by
Liz Truss took herself out. She resigned.
Why do you want to allow?
She wasn't thrown out. She resigned.
Is allowed to get there by playing some political games and having other people playing political games determine who that person's going to be. And I hear all the time from Americans about undermining democracy. My goodness, what do you call what's going on in the UK? You couldn't do what's happened in the UK in the United States. It's not allowed in your constitution for that to happen. So I mean, it's a disgrace. I'm not sure where you come from. Now, when you talk about the Greens Party is when they've existed outside the United States, where they have a little bit more political clout. Okay, they have gone down extremely partisan lines. At the moment, we sit here in Australia looking at our Labor Party, who makes these backroom deals with the Australian Greens. They sit on the left when it comes to energy conversations and conversations about mining and renewables. They sit on the left of countries like Norway, Denmark, Finland, etc. They're on the left of them. So the kinds of policies that they are pursuing are clearly not workable. They're clearly not financially viable, but they do so anyway because of the sake of partisanship. So unfortunately, unless you're going to have a no political party situation where people run on their own merits, then I don't think that that's going to get you anywhere. And even if you did do that, all you'd end up with is either a whole heap of billionaires and very, very wealthy people because they could afford to do it, or you'd follow Chris Greco's advice and Washington, D.C. will be full of former catering corps members.
So real quickly, let's just take a quick shift into some other stuff going around the country and world. We haven't heard from war in Ukraine, so I don't know if anyone has any insight there, but continued turmoil there. Real quickly, just one thing I think it's important to look at is the early voting numbers are coming in. And good news possibly for the Democrats in Georgia, 1 million people have already voted. That's a big jump from the last non-presidential elections in 2018. Typically, Democrats vote early, and they get enough of a lead. It's hard to catch up. In Virginia, more people are voting ahead of Election Day, and that's really a purple state, so that's good. But the bad news in North Carolina and Texas, the numbers are really down. And so as we look at that key Senate race between former Supreme Court Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of North Carolina, Sherry Beasley, versus United States Congressman Ted Budd, a low early vote in North Carolina does not bode well for the Democrats. And that could be the swing Senate seat. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do to bring people in, to turn people out to vote. But we'll be and real quickly with Ukraine, Ukraine has reclaimed more territory from Russian forces yesterday in the southern Kherson and Donetsk regions, area that Putin has claimed now belong to Russia after his so-called annexation. And they're going to carry out drills today on nuclear forces as they continue to claim that Ukraine is planning to use a dirty bomb. So those are some major issues. And the final one I'll talk about today is American buses expected to be all electric by 2030. Not sure how that's going to happen, but it's on its way. So anyway, folks, those are three of the top issues.
Are they going to be some of those school buses that caught fire in the depot? Are those sort of buses that you're talking about?
Well,
let me just make a comment. Let me just make a comment on Georgia. So first of all, you did say a couple of things about Herschel Walker. What about Raphael Warnock, his ex-wife or current wife, whoever she was? There's videos on YouTube where she called the police and she'd claimed that he'd been abusive to her. What about those allegations? I bet if that was a Republican, it would be a whole different story. But a really important question I want to ask you, Steve Rao. So the voter turnout has gone up in Georgia, has it? Because I was under the impression, based on what all you guys have been telling me for all these years, that the Brian Kemp and the Georgian Republicans were suppressing the vote. So what's going on? How come voter turnout's gone up if the vote was suppressed?
Well, we don't know the numbers. We don't know whether those are Democrat or Republican numbers, but that is a good point. Well played. Well played, my friend.
Well, the other thing that I can say is that there have been some very active efforts to actually get the vote out in Georgia. So that has definitely been going on. And part of the argument is around those arguments as to whether there had been past suppression and also the impact that certain target groups can have on the electoral group.
At least Steve conceded the point. What are you going to spin it into? That because voter suppression was so bad before, thank goodness Stacey Abrams came out.
Well, we don't know if those numbers are Democrat or Republican. It could be high Republican votes.
We don't know I agree with what Steve is saying. We don't know where the numbers are coming from. But I am saying that there are, because I know some of the people in Georgia, there are people that are specifically pursuing different groups to try to get them out to vote. It's called a Get Out the Vote campaign. I just told you I was part of one on Sunday and everything. So I know what Get Out the Vote campaigns look like. And to your point about the buses and everything, I think that here in Durham, most of the buses are hybrid from what I remember. And so electrical buses would be an interesting thing. But there could be another issue with that and everything. And I think it's nationwide is we can have all these fancy electric buses and everything, but if there's nobody to drive the buses, what good is it? Because that's one of the issues that we're having here is that there's a shortage of bus drivers. And I think that from what I understand, is a nationwide problem.
I want to talk about this Ethiopia situation, but I have an answer for that. They're all autonomous driving now. So most of the cars, because we met with the vice president of Ford a couple years ago, and it was a huge discussion this past year at CERAWeek, which is the world's largest oil, gas, and energy conference, where all the world leaders attend and discuss these things. Alternative energy is huge. I wish that we would follow some of the other countries who have set some good examples, like hydrogen, which is very clean, and they have successfully converted over to hydrogen. There are so many alternatives. I wish it wouldn't all be electric. So I think that this is a political push to push everything electric, though I have a hybrid car and I love it. And, that's partial electric. I think that there are some other alternatives we need to be pushing towards besides just the electric. I think we need to spread our wings a little bit and try out some of the other alternatives, but look at other countries who are successful. But Chris, please share with us the story you have.
Please, yeah.
So basically, when I first came in the intelligence community in the late 1970s, Eritrea, which if you put up the map, you can see it, Ethiopia and Eritrea were having an amazing amount of back and forth. To the point of thousands killed between Eritrea and Ethiopia, Eritrea trying to gain their independence. So basically Eritrea, because of Ethiopia's situation, Eritrea was able to defeat them and make their own country. Now, if you take a look at this, Ethiopia originally had all this coastline. They had the entire coastline here. Eritrea took their entire coastline all the way down to Djibouti. And so that's now what's happening is that they have this thing called the Tigray, and the Tigray region, which is up in here, and I'm going to show you a more detailed map that shows it right about Mekelle up in this area, has all this region. They are trying to fight for independence against Ethiopia. Now, interestingly enough, in 2019, the leader of Ethiopia got the Nobel Peace Prize, and then in 2020 raised an armed conflict against the Tigray region. So, Nobel Peace Prizes to me are kind of like, you might as well just, you might as well just get them from Walmart, because I mean they're ridiculously, they don't mean a thing. So basically what that happened there. Now what I want to show you is where Tigray is, because I think that's important to understand. So this is another map, and this is Ethiopia in here, and this is Ethiopia border with Eritrea here. This is northwestern Tigray, central Tigray, eastern Tigray, southern Tigray, and western Tigray. So that entire region, remember that Mekele, we looked at that other map? So basically you have all this area all in here that's saying, hey, we want to be independent. So from that point of view, they have this entire boundary area here they've kind of an independent province, but the Ethiopians are battling them out right now, to the point where they're a lot of starvation. They're severely food compromised anyway, but now they're having this. And believe it or not, if Sasha were here, I'd tell him this is bigger. This is a bigger conflict than Ukraine is right now from the standpoint of casualties.
And Chris, that fight has been going on for a while, because my mom,
this region is not as politically important to Western countries as what the conflict is.
Exactly right.
Well, that's very interesting.
Why they don't get any attention, and this is the unfortunate thing that's happened to Africa for generations.
Yep.
And that is very unfortunate. And just along those same lines, yes, I definitely knew about that conflict for a number of years, because my dad, when he was teaching at UNC, University of North Carolina, there was actually a exchange program between Eritrea and UNC, and so he definitely went there and taught for, I think, 3 or 4 years. And that conflict has been going on for decades, and it's been going on consistently. They have like moments of ceasefire, and then they get back into conflict, but definitely that is a long-ranging conflict, and it actually kind of scares you that a lot of these conflicts around the world are not well reported. And I'm actually talking to somebody. I'm gonna need to talk to some of my folks in Ethiopia and Eritrea to see if they'll come on. But I am talking to somebody from Haiti that I'm hoping to get on either this week or next week to explain some of the things that they've been going through as well. Because I did reach out to somebody from that community that also isn't reported enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is fantastic. And I'm going to be closing out today on an event that I attended in Raleigh, where there was someone from Eritrea there. But Kimberly, go ahead.
Oh, Nick was trying to talk.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Mark is understating that this whole conflict is not just underreported, it's completely ignored by the Western press. So I want to thank Chris Greco for bringing this to the attention on World Edition, because you're not going to hear that on any U.S. media, CBS, ABC, NBC, PBS.
Why would that be? Why would they ignore it?
Why would they ignore it? Because the thing is, it's like what Shaquille said. There's no atomic bombs, and frankly, it's Africa. It's not Europe. And we're Eurocentral. It's central.
Human rights, people being killed.
We don't give a rat's rear.
Yeah, but I mean, do you remember years ago? Remember years ago there was a conflict. I might have my details wrong, but I think it was Chechnya or something that when they took over that school. It was a news report, but what did the West do about it? We just, that's really sad. And there was a heap of kids that died. They had the kids locked in. Do you guys remember what I'm talking about? Where they had the kids locked up in a room for a couple of days, and a heap of them died and all that because of some conflict, or it might have been with Kosovo or something. We didn't do anything about it, even though it got news coverage. We just didn't care. Whatever happened to those Nigerian schoolgirls that were taken?
Well, I'll tell you why this is not important. I got the share screen up.
I definitely want to get that dated up and everything. But to Shaquille's point and everything, there was actually just on, I think it was yesterday, and I was actually finding it when I was looking for another news story and along those lines. We talk about mass shootings. It's come up in our conversations oftentimes, but guess what? There are mass shootings in other parts of the world as well. There was actually a mass shooting in Thailand. Then that actually happened, I think, either yesterday or the day before. And how much reporting has been done on that?
We're not going to report every mass shooting around the world, but it's very interesting. That's another thing that has been brought up, and Zeldin made comment about it, and the response was the same as Whitmer's response in Michigan. I don't know why Republicans have got to oppose sensible gun reform. Yeah. Well, hang on, who says they're sensible? Right? You don't just declare it sensible and that's it. So, people say, I support red flag laws and all that sort of stuff. That's a whole different debate.
Well, it's the same thing, Shaquille, when they say senseless gun violence. Is there any sensible gun violence? I just like, senseless gun violence.
So I don't think that has any merit. But I was very interested to see that none of you North Carolinians have jumped on on Lee from New York because of Zeldin's comment about how bad it is that New York businesses have moved down to Cary, North Carolina. They should be coming back up to to New York. So do we see some interstate rivalry there? Do we see North Carolina saying, no, send them down, or what's happening?
There's no rivalry. Shaquille, get over it. There's no rivalry. There's no rivalry. Yeah. North Carolina is a better place to live than New York. Rivalry over.
That's true.
Seriously.
This is the reason why Ethiopia, I have that on the screen, the reason why Ethiopia is not important. Look at the exports from Ethiopia. This is a CIA World Fat Book. Coffee, sesame seeds, gold, cut flowers, not that much gold actually, cut flowers, and zinc. That's their exports. And look what their imports are. Their imports are aircraft, gas turbines, packaged medicines, electric filament, and cars. So, I mean, the bottom line is that if this said uranium or bauxite or, something that we really, really needed, chromite is one of the exports from one of the countries from one of the stands, right? I can't remember if it's Turkestan or wherever it is. We cannot mine chromite here in the U.S. Cannot. We have to import it. But we can import coffee, sesame seeds, gold, cut flowers, and zinc from other countries. So it doesn't present an international problem.
Hang on, but Chris, you get most of the uranium. America gets most of the uranium and plutonium for your bombs from us here in Australia. Now,
yes, that is true.
We sat here in Australia and were just totally bewildered when our former Prime Minister, while he was the Prime Minister, said, we're putting trade sanctions on Russia. This is before the full sanctions were there internationally. We're putting trade sanctions. We're going to embargo their goods. And Australians went, do we do much trade with Russia? And the Bureau of Statistics said, oh, yeah, we do about 0.01% of our GDP, or so, which is statistically indistinguishable from zero. But yet we jumped on the bandwagon anyway. So I don't think it's just that. I think it's what plays to politics and what doesn't. That's what I think.
Let's go ahead and get Mark,
I know we're getting ready to wrap up. We got to get to Steve and everything. I was going to make a comment to Nick's comment just really quickly. Yeah, North Carolina, I'm a proud North Carolinian, and everything is better than New York, but I do love New York. But, we are getting a lot of inflationary prices down here in North Carolina, because I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were getting these lovely $1 million condos that a lot of people locally cannot afford, but the folks from New York and other places can. So they're coming down to move into those $1 million condos in downtown. So there is a lot of that going on as well. So there's these lovely pricing things because it's cheaper than New York, but it's still $1 million.
No, it's not. It's not just that. It's because you guys are trying to say that you're now going to turn Democrats, and they think, well, if we're going to leave New York, we don't want to go to Florida. We want to go to North Carolina and turn it blue.
Well, folks, it's time to close out. I'm going to go ahead and bring the plane down home for a soft landing. It hasn't been too turbulent today, but it's always an honor to run this show. I want to thank Kimberly Calhoun for congratulate her always. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her hard work along with Nick. So exciting. My final closeout is just this weekend on Saturday, I attended the U.S. Refugees and Committee for Immigrants and Refugees. It was a 15-year celebration, and the North Carolina Raleigh chapter celebrated some really great stories of refugees who came in from Afghanistan and other countries, and the kinds of lives that they've made for themselves in North Carolina. It was a great way. I was there with the Wake County Chair, Sig Hutchison, as a key guest, and I gave some remarks. And I reminded them in my kind of way I speak that just like Alexander Hamilton, immigrants get the job done. And we have to sometimes remember that those who come to America through unforeseen circumstances have been able to come here and make success of their lives. At the same time, we do have immigration challenges we need to face in terms of border security, controlling legal immigration, making illegal immigration illegal, and kind of things that we have to worry about. But at the end of the day, I want to thank the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. The president was an Eritrean, and there was also a coffee celebration where they have Eritrean coffee. So, Chris, thank you for bringing up the nation of Eritrea. And that's my final take. I want to thank all of you for being with us today on Roku TV, Pod TV, and from our family to yours, in the spirit of Diwali. Let the light and love of our hearts always lift us out of the darkness, because that is our true GPS. Forget operating systems and upgrades to our iPhone. Let's try to upgrade the way we treat each other, respect each other, and transform our communities. That's my closing message for today. From our family to yours, have a wonderful, wonderful evening or day wherever you are in the world. This is Steve Rouse signing off October 26th, 2022. See you tomorrow.